lies a very shaky situation. Barry Peterson of CBS News has the latest now from Sarajevo.
Barry Peterson, CBS News, Sarajevo.
Israel may be on the verge of face-to-face negotiations with the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Up until now, the Israelis would talk only to Palestinians with no official links to the PLO. But yesterday, 7 members of the Palestinian peace negotiating team were appointed to senior PLO positions. So if the peace talks resume, Israel will in effect be talking to the PLO. Today on News World, Israel's health minister laid out his country's position on possible self-rule for Palestinians in the occupied territories.
In Bangkok.
Pope John Paul II is going hiking in the Colorado Rockies today. This is the second day of his 5-day visit, and he's making it a quieter one. Yesterday, the Pope had a busy schedule. In the morning, he met with President Bill Clinton on the campus of a Jesuit university in Denver. Their meeting was cordial. The only whiff of controversy came with the Pope's urging to defend life, an oblique reference to Clinton's tolerance of abortion. Later in the day, the Pope got a thunderous welcome at Denver's Mile High Stadium. The Pope's speech, dotted with the occasional joke, focused on his Defend Life theme. He encouraged the 90,000 faithful to return to their moral roots. Cuban President Fidel Castro has little to celebrate today, the 67th anniversary of his birth. Around him, Cuba's economic crisis worsens by the day. The latest example is the daily power cuts of up to 16 hours. That's because there isn't enough fuel to run the generators. The U.S. imposed trade embargo is now 30 years old, and it's not likely to be lifted anytime soon. That's because Castro has flatly refused to consider political reforms. It is 17 minutes after the top of the clock. That is 13 before in Newfoundland. Well, graphic pictures of the child victims of Bosnia's civil war have finally had an impact this week. The plight of a wounded child in Sarajevo has touched off a landslide of public sympathy. Several governments, including Canada's, are now making plans to airlift wounded people out of that city for treatment. Canada says that it will airlift up to 20 Sarajevo hospital patients needing immediate medical treatment. But the sudden interest in politicians in helping the victims of this war makes some people suspicious about the timing. Joining us now from Ottawa is John White. Mr. White is a therapist in family violence with the Ontario government. Mr. White has been frustrated in his efforts to bring out injured children for treatment in Canada. Mr. White, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we see countries all over the world now getting on the bandwagon, all saying they want to help and bring children and others out of Sarajevo to seek treatment in their respective countries. You've been to Croatia, I understand, about 3 times since last fall, trying to get children out of there and back to a hospital in London, Ontario, but really haven't had a lot of success, have you?
No, well, firstly, I'm very pleased, of course, that the Canadian government and the international community has decided to respond at this point in time. We have been trying 22.
Let's walk through this a little bit, because I want to try to understand a little more clearly from you as to where the resistance was. I mean, you seem to be painting a picture that the resistance was almost at every level that you talked to, whether it be in the former Yugoslavia or here in Canada.
Well, that's correct. We have talked to Bosnian officials. We have in Bosnia.
Well, what were the reasons given to you? I mean, what were people telling you when you said, look, we have the hospital here, we have people who are willing to donate their time to treat these children? What were the reasons why this couldn't be done?
Well, one of the examples, for instance, when I approached DND in February, Department of National Defense, to solicit their aid in flying the children out of Sarajevo, those children were dying on a daily basis while we puttered around trying to decide what the appropriate thing to do was.
Let me ask you this. A lot of people have said, or some critics have been saying as of late, that in rather than spending all this money and flying individuals out of Sarajevo to countries around the world for medical treatment, that the money should really be spent, if we're going to do this properly, by spending more money in Sarajevo to upgrade the hospitals there, the facilities there, and you can treat a lot more people, get a lot more bang for the buck, if you like, by sending the money into Sarajevo.
Well, I think there's a number of things that can be happening collaterally. The fact is that the UNHCR but those children were dying on a daily basis while we puttered around trying to decide what the appropriate thing to do was.
Let me ask you this. A lot of people have said, or some critics have been saying as of late, that in rather than spending all this money and flying individuals out of Sarajevo to countries around the world for medical treatment, that the money should really be spent, if we're going to do this properly, by spending more money in Sarajevo to upgrade the hospitals there, the facilities there, and you can treat a lot more people, get a lot more bang for the buck, if you like, by sending the money into Sarajevo.
Well, I think there's a number of things that can be happening collaterally.
Let me ask you one final question. Are you afraid that after this story, this public interest in this individual story of Irma and a few other individuals have been told that it's inspired all this public emotion which has got politicians to act, do you think in a month from now the same interest is still going to be there?
Well, if we have anything to do with it in Safe Haven for Children, I can guarantee you the interest will still be there. I was made some promises, some commitments yesterday by Parent BD.
Mr. White, good luck in your efforts.
Thank you very much.
In other news, Canadian troops returning from Europe are losing some of their personal goods to a bureaucratic holdup, and something is rotten in the state of Nova Scotia fishing. We have those stories on Dateline.